Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah. Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
You have tuned in to Inspire FM and you are now listening to the Quranic Reflections show. Bismillah. Inshallah, today we'll be addressing the issue of the manner of seeking knowledge. So this is a continuation from a previous show we done, which was addressing the importance of seeking knowledge, where we spoke about some of the virtues and rewards pertaining to it, and some of the dangers associated to speaking without knowledge. And we also spoke about some of the obligatory components of knowledge that every Muslim needs to have. So the main focus of today's show will inshallah be the question, who should we take knowledge from? I mean, how do we know somebody is actually sufficiently qualified to be speaking about the different Islamic sciences? So with this, I'll hand it over to Sidi Noor, if we could please elaborate on this.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. So inshallah today we're going to be speaking about how to study knowledge correctly. We will later on move on to the adab or etiquette of knowledge, and what's the best method and some of the sunnahs, if you like, or recommendations related to it. But as you mentioned, the first thing to speak about is who to seek knowledge from. It's something very, very important, and something we need to give consideration to before embarking upon seeking knowledge, because in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ you have indications with the Sahaba and with the Tabi'een. With all of them you have these clear indications that one should be very careful who one takes knowledge from, inshaAllah ta'ala. And I think it was maybe the previous session when we spoke about knowledge, how Ibn Sirin, rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the Tabi'een, the great scholars of the Tabi'een, he said this affair of ours is deen, is religion. So be careful who you take your religion from. So this is something very, very important to give consideration to, who one is going to take knowledge from, inshaAllah ta'ala. The short answer, although we're going to go into some detail and look at a number of hadith with regard to this, the short answer to this question is that one should take knowledge from a person who is in line with our Islamic tradition, in line with the way of the ulama, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ up to our time. We have what we call a tradition, or a sunnah of the ulama, and somebody who is connected to this, insha'Allah ta'ala, is somebody we should take from, and somebody who's disconnected from this is somebody we should respect, inshallah. We respect anybody teaching the religion, inshallah, but we may stay away from taking religious knowledge from such a person. Why? Because the religion for us as Muslims is the most important thing in our life.
Sure.
And it dictates our success and happiness in this life and the next life. And obviously a very important aspect of religion is to study it and to understand it. And no doubt, as anybody who's understands the environment around them will understand, there are many different people nowadays teaching religion, and which is not unique to our time. This has been the case throughout Islamic history. There are people who had different understandings of Islam, different approaches to certain aspects of the deen, and they had their various madhahib, if you like, or various firaq, various sects that you had teaching Islam significantly differently one from the other. So what do we consider the correct way? The correct way is the way that the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum were on, as they took from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Tabi'een and thereafter. You could call it the way of the Salaf as-Salih, which many people like to call it nowadays, the way of the Salaf as-Salih or the early Muslims, and we're going to speak about this inshallah as we go through. The first thing to mention, one of the things one should look at with regards to a teacher, this for me is very, very important, that anybody one takes as a teacher, this teacher should have a focus on teaching the Islamic sciences and should not be focused on sectarianism and attacking people or groups or what have you. If we find we're studying with a person or with a group of people where their primary focus or one of their main focuses seems to be always speaking about other groups and always attacking them, okay, always, that seems to be the purpose of it, or one of the primary focuses, then I would strongly advise against this. It's something in my own studies I avoided always, okay, and it always turned me away, and I felt from the beginning that this cannot be the method of the Prophet ﷺ, okay, to constantly attack people and cause divisions or what have you, and be sectarian. Having said that, it's important for any scholar, any teacher, to point out mistakes. Okay, be they mistakes regarding, how certain people practice the deen or what have you, or certain things which are taught regarding the deen. So we have to do, no doubt about it. Okay, we have to point out certain mistakes, no doubt about it. But what I'm saying is, when it gets to a point where it seems to be the focus. You see, the focus should be to teach the Islamic sciences. Okay? And this, alhamdulillah, this is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is part of our tradition, our irth, if you like, what we've inherited from the ummah. That, they divided Islamic knowledge into different sciences, so each one could be taught thoroughly and well, and a person could have a good understanding of that and move on to others, and build up their understanding of Islam. And this has always been the methodology. Let me turn to a couple of hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The first one is from the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, and it's a strong hadith, Hasan li ghayrihi. The hadith scholars graded it as, where the Prophet ﷺ said, أيها الناس عليكم بالجماعة وإياكم والفرقة. أيها الناس عليكم بالجماعة وإياكم والفرقة. أيها الناس عليكم بالجماعة وإياكم والفرقة. Okay, which translates as, O people, stick to the jama'ah, the majority, and stay away from furqa, sectarianism. And the Prophet ﷺ repeated this 3 times. Okay, this hadith in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. So what do we find here? We find 2 very important instructions from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. First of all, stick to the jama'ah. This is why I said that my advice for people would be to stick to study with people who follow the tradition, our Islamic tradition. You see, the tradition of the ulama. They study books and teach from books, and follow a methodology which has been the methodology of this ummah from the beginning. You see, so this is what we consider the jama'ah. Okay, the majority of Muslims, what they've been doing from the beginning of Islam, and don't follow. And I would advise people not to take from somebody who has a completely new, different methodology. Okay, right. Away from methodology of our traditional scholars. And the second thing, وَإِيَّاكُمْ وَالْفُرْقَةِ. Okay, be careful of sectarianism. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ warned against it. As I said earlier, not to go towards those people who are always constantly attacking. Okay, we have, unfortunately, on YouTube and the internet generally, you have too many people who praise people for being really good, having some kind of expertise in attacking others. Okay, they often find comments, or I'm sometimes sent videos or what have you, of this sheikh attacked this group and really annihilated them or what have you. This is not our way, and this is not what the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to do. But not to constantly attack people. As I said, if there's a mistake, an error which is made by certain Muslims, or certain things which are taught which are incorrect, this needs to be pointed out. Okay, but this kind of atmosphere which is sometimes created, and this kind of approach, it's not part of our adab.
So just a question, Siddhi, maybe a bit broad, but for those who don't know, what is the Islamic tradition? How can somebody tell if somebody is following the Islamic tradition or not?
Yeah, I can be very broad about it. So, for example, you have what we call the 4 madhabs. Okay? This has been part of these 4 madhabs have been part of Islam from the earliest of times. Okay, from the time of what we call the time of the Salaf. I just spoke about that earlier. Okay, the Salaf as-Salih, the early Muslims. And generally speaking, as a ummah, we have always and continue to look back towards those early generations. Before I go much further with this, I want to speak about why. Why do we focus on the Salaf as-Salih? Why is there such an emphasis on those early Muslims? And the correct answer and the short answer to this is that the Prophet ﷺ praised those people in particular. So we have a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari where the Prophet ﷺ said, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم ثم يجيء أقوام تسبق شهادة أحدهم يمينه ويمينه شهادته. Okay, this hadith in Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ said, the best of people are my generation, then those that come after them, then those that come after them. Okay? This hadith is speaking about the greatest of this ummah. Okay? And here quite clearly the greatest of this ummah are the Sahaba. Okay? And then the Tabi'een, and then the Tabi'een. This hadith has been interpreted in two different ways. One is the word qaran. Okay, what's meant by qaran? Some they understood this to mean generation, as I just translated it. The best of generations, or the best of people in my generation, meaning the Sahaba. And then the Tabi'in, then the Tabi'in. Others they said qaran, in Arabic language refers to 100 years. Okay. So then the best is the first 100 years, then the next, then the third. This is why some scholars they define the Salaf as the first 300 years of this ummah. Right. Those scholars who were in that period. So this has always been our tradition, okay? Always to look back to the early Muslims. Why? Because when we study Islam, essentially what are we doing? We're looking at Quran, and we're looking at Hadith, and we're looking at an interpretation of it, okay?
Right.
Because we have, sometimes certain slogans which are put about which can confuse people, and for me are completely inaccurate. Okay, so many people they'll say, "Oh, brother, I follow Quran and Hadith." Okay, I don't follow this, I don't follow that. I follow Quran and Hadith.
Everybody seems to be claiming this.
Exactly. I mean, the implication there is that I'm following Quran and Hadith. Nobody else is following Quran and Hadith. Okay, this for me is an absurd statement to make, and this for me is completely inaccurate and massively misleading. Why? Because the Muslims generally, we might have small pockets here and there, but the Muslims generally, they all follow or attempt to follow Quran and Hadith. The true question is not are you following Quran or Hadith, the true question is whose interpretation of Quran and Hadith are you following? This is a true question. Okay, this is the crux of the matter. Okay, somebody might say, I follow Quran and Hadith, meaning what? Meaning I sit at home alone and I read the Quran and I determine what it means. Right. And I read Hadith and alone at home, and I determine what they mean. I don't need anybody else's influence or expertise or wisdom to affect my understanding. I'm going to decide for myself. This person is going to claim that he follows Quran and Hadith. Okay? But do we consider this to be a valid way of following Quran and Hadith? Him interpreting it himself? Generally, no. Okay, why? Because we consider the most correct interpretation of Quran and Hadith to be that of the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the Tabi'een, or that early Salaf generation. Okay, this is generally where we go towards with our interpretation of Quran and Hadith. So again, let's not get confused by slogans. Let's not get misled by slogans. The issue is not are you following Quran and Hadith? Whose interpretation of Quran and Hadith are you following? And as an ummah, this is part of our tradition, we've always considered the earlier opinions and interpretations to be stronger. Okay? And this leads to, because you asked a bit more specifically what's meant by traditional Islam. Traditional Islam for well over 1,000 years, a part of it, or over 1,200 years, a part of traditional Islam has been to follow a madhab, for example. It doesn't matter which madhab one follows, whether it's Hanafi, whether it's Shafi, whether it's Maliki, whether it's Hanbali. Okay? These are all considered valid interpretations of Quran and Hadith. Okay? So, and if you give the interpretation of Salaf, okay, to the first 300 years, all of these Imams, they're within that period. Okay? If you speak about the first three generations, then no doubt Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala is from there, and Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala is from there, and Imam Shafi and Imam Ahmad are very close to that period as well. Okay? So what's the purpose of these madahib, for example? The purpose of having these, and why Muslims traditionally have followed these, is because it offers an interpretation of Quran and Hadith going right back to the very early period. Okay, and then it doesn't stop at Abu Hanifa. We have, for example, I apologize to our listeners. I'm often speaking about the Hanafi school. This is because, this is something that I've studied for a very long time. I have limited knowledge on Shafi'i school, Maliki school, even less knowledge, and almost no knowledge regarding the Hanbali school. I consider them, as do the ulama always have, they're all valid. They're all equal in their authenticity.
Sure.
Okay, but I will speak always in more detail about the Hanafi, because this is something I've studied in detail and continue to study in detail, and I'm going to have more knowledge of. But with regard to Abu Hanifa, for example, when we speak about Abu Hanifa and his interpretation of Quran and Hadith, it doesn't stop with him. It's not something he introduced. He took it from his teachers. Okay, who took it from their teachers, who took it from their teachers, and these lineages of Abu Hanifa, or these knowledge-based lineages, if you like, this chain of knowledge for Abu Hanifa, you have it very clearly going back to Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu ta'ala, and back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The point is that why have they always followed madahib, and why has this been our tradition? Always because you're getting an interpretation of Quran and Hadith harkening back all the way to that early period and all the way eventually back to the Prophet ﷺ. This we consider to be a safer route and a traditional route to understanding Quran and Hadith and getting a correct interpretation. Okay, so to answer more broadly once again, okay, who do we, when seeking out a teacher, what are we interested in? Somebody whose methodology with regards to understanding the religion includes this, that I'm going to try to understand and interpret and teach Quran and Hadith based on what the Prophet, obviously what the Prophet but based on how the Sahaba understood it, based on how the Tabi'een understood it, the Tabi'een understood it, and generally speaking, the further back I can go and link my knowledge to, the more authentic I'm going to consider it. Now,
Sure.
So this approach is very, very important.
So say if somebody said, okay, I want to stick to the Islamic tradition and I want to follow a madhahib, but I really don't want to restrict myself by following only one, because surely there are other potentially valid interpretations out there as well.
Yeah.
So what is the right approach regarding this? Is somebody encouraged to do this? Is somebody discouraged to do this?
In and of itself, to follow one madhab, parts of one madhab and parts of another, in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with it, as we just spoke about, that all four of these madhabs, and I should mention this, in our Sunni tradition, if you like, it's not the case that we've only ever had four madhabs. Okay? Rather, the way we understand it is that in the time of Sahaba, radiyallahu ta'ala, there were many madhahib there. Some scholars, they've written that you had at least 20 mujtahid imams amongst the Sahaba, which means what? That you had at least 20 madhabs in the time of the Sahaba.
Right.
Okay? And then you had many, many more in the time of the Tabi'een and Tabi'een. There were lots and lots of madhabs out there. Okay? And some of them are quite well known, and some of them we have quite a lot of detail regarding. For example, the madhab of Layth ibn Sa'd from Egypt, contemporary of Imam Malik, okay, and others besides, Imam Awza'i, Dawood al-Zahri, and others besides. But there were lots of madhabs around. But the reality is that these four they survived, if you like. Meaning, what happened with these four? They were recorded, they were documented in detail. Because what we don't have a complete madhab from any Sahabi. What we have from Sahaba are fatawa. Okay? We have fatawa regarding, or legal rulings regarding one issue or a second issue or a third issue or what have you. This we have from the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. What we don't have is enough information from any single Sahabi to understand what their madhab was. Okay. And this is with many of the Tabi'een and other scholars besides. We have a general understanding, we have limited information, certain fatwa they gave. Whereas with these four Imams, we have so much information regarding the fatwa they gave and the methodology that they used, that we have enough information to follow it at the madhab. So this is the first thing to say, that it's not the case there's only ever been four, but these four, because of the way they were documented so fully, they survived to our time, inshallah ta'ala.
Maybe something I should have clarified earlier on, but what is a madhab?
Now, a madhab, in Arabic language, madhab is a path that you take. This is what's meant by madhab in Arabic language. Whereas in fiqh and in technical terms, a madhab is a school of law, a school of jurisprudence, a legal school. Okay, and what this does is provides you legal rulings with regards to all kinds of different aspects of Islam. Now, so coming back to the question, could a person follow more than one? Yes, a person, as we said, that all four of these are valid, a person can. But practically speaking, there's an issue. And what's the biggest issue? Again, me speaking as somebody who's been studying the Hanafi school for well over a decade and a half, what you learn is that a madhab or legal rulings, even in one school, are very, very detailed. You see, it takes a long time to master one. You see, and it takes a long, long time to even really, at some level, get to grips with one. So, for a person to, study holistically for madhahib, this is very, very difficult. But theoretically, it's not impossible at all. But yes, if a person has studied 1, 2, 3, or 4 madhabs in detail, and wants to, on particular legal ruling, follow this, and a particular legal ruling, follow that madhab, as long as they know it fully and well with its details, it's permitted, inshallah, nothing against it. Although, as I was speaking about at the beginning, generally speaking, the way of our ulama in our tradition has always been, even if they study more than one madhab, they generally practice one. No. But theoretically, nothing wrong with this. The biggest stumbling block would be to study it in enough detail to be able to practice it. Another hadith I would just mention here, again, referring back to the same issue. This hadith is in Tirmidhi, and it's a Hasan hadith, a strong hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ reported, the Prophet ﷺ said, Yadullahi ma'al jama'ah. The hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning the assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is with the jama'ah. Now, is with the majority. So again, this is, when we study the deen, when we practice the deen, this is something which is going to be repeated to us, hadith after hadith after hadith. Okay, be with the majority. Okay, don't follow something which seems to be, a firqah. Okay, a sect which has moved away from the majority in one way or another. So this is, I think, the best advice I can give with regards to this. Try to study with people who, inshallah ta'ala, are devoted, people who respect the tradition that we have and follow the tradition that we have, and teach according to the tradition we have, and not people who are bringing really variant methodologies with regards to it, because they have inevitably gone away from the jama'ah, and we've had multiple hadith already speaking about the importance of jama'ah, or the majority, sticking to the majority. One more hadith as we come up to the break regarding this. We have hadith in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, which is a sahih hadith, sahih li ghayrihi, where I'm just going to quote a part of this hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ said, regarding supplications that the Prophet ﷺ made to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the supplications was Allah yajma'a ummati ala dalalah. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ said, I supplicated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that my ummah should not unite on something which is astray, dalalah. Okay, so again, this is something important, that something which the ummah has agreed upon, or the majority of the ummah has agreed upon, okay, this is going to be seen as the right way, the right methodology. Okay? And whenever we find groups or individuals going away from that, moving away from that tradition, moving away from the mainstream, moving away from what's always been the method, then we have some problem here, and this is something that I would advise people to stay away from. Yeah.
I mean, in education and society, we're always encouraged to challenge authority and not just take the answer of this is how it's always been done, so we should just accept it. So I think that's why sometimes that kind of rhetoric can be quite attractive, where you say, you know what, let's move away from all this argumentation that's been going on and differences of opinion that have been going on for 1,000 plus years, and let's just go directly to the sources. But then it comes back to what you mentioned earlier, is you're essentially creating a new madhab just in and of itself through doing that.
Yeah, this is a point. This has been around. I think, as you said, it's probably pushed a lot in non-Muslim societies. It's constantly challenging authority or what have you. In Islam, we respect authority. You have ultimate and absolute authority, which is Quran and Hadith, authentic Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which can never be challenged. And then, especially in the Sunni tradition, you have the authority of the Sahaba. The authority of the Sahaba ranks very, very highly. We don't consider the Sahaba ma'soom, okay, that they are faultless, but generally speaking, again, this has been the way of our ummah always. Okay, that they respect the opinions of the Sahaba, they respect the fatwa of the Sahaba, they recognize the preeminence of Sahaba in their spiritual position, but even more importantly in the knowledge they have and the understanding they have, and the fatwa they give and such things are considered very highly regarded. As for those generations afterwards, again, we have hadith instruction for us to give respect to those generations, okay, and to understand that there's something special about them, and this is why throughout our history that's what we've always done. Okay, whenever we've spoken about a religious issue, right, where can we take this back to? Okay? Not that this is my opinion and this is what I think and this is what is correct Islam is according to me. No. Okay. When we have some understanding, right, take it back. Who else had the same understanding? Is there something there to authenticate it? Now, this is, as I said, this has always been our tradition. You're right, we have a movement away from this nowadays, but this is not in line with our tradition.
Jazakallah khair, Sidi. Inshallah, we'll stop for a short break now. Assalamu alaikum.
سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
You have tuned into Inspire FM. Welcome back to the Quranic Reflections Show, Part 2. So just before the break, we were speaking about the manner of seeking knowledge, who we should seek knowledge from, and how do we know if somebody is actually sufficiently qualified to be teaching the Islamic sciences. So inshallah, this half of the show I'd like to start off with a question of, is it more important for men to learn Islamic sciences than women?
Yeah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. This is an important question. Some people might see it as a strange question, and in many ways it is, because it's, to study the religion is, I would start off by saying it's equally important for males and females. And as we, in the last session, we quoted hadith about how studying Islam is an obligation on all Muslims. Okay, so this is not specific to males or females. From the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, you have incredibly knowledgeable males, you have incredibly knowledgeable females. The Prophet ﷺ had male students, had female students. The following generations, you had many, many scholars from both generations. And I don't know where this understanding has come from, but it does seem to have affected us as an ummah for at least some period of time. We've had for a reasonable period of time less and less female scholars, which is a real shame, and it's detrimental to the ummah. Now, so is it more important for males to study? No, absolutely not. Is it more important for females to study? I'd start off by saying no, it's equally important for both. Okay. From one perspective, you could say it's even more important for the female. Why? Because, and some scholars they mention this and explain things like this. Why even more important for the female to be knowledgeable? Because she's usually going to spend more time raising the children, okay, and more time imparting tarbiyah upon the children, okay, for their religious upbringing or what have you, and for that reason she needs a great deal of knowledge. But then obviously we could say, well, the male needs knowledge because he's involved in business and transactions and buying and selling and earning a living, that kind of stuff. He also needs a great deal of knowledge. So what I would like to stick to is what's mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ made no difference between the male and the female and obliged it on both. So I would like to say it's equally important for both, and it's equally obligatory for both certain elements of it, as we spoke about last time.
It's interesting you say that, because from some of my conversations with people, they say they use that exact reason for why women shouldn't actually study, is because they're probably more than likely going to spend their time raising children, which is why they don't need it.
My God. So if they're not going to, if they're spending their time with the children and they're giving them or imparting values and affecting their behavior and their decision making and all of these things, if this is not based on Islam, what's it going to be based on?
No doubt. No doubt. Okay. Jazakallah khair for clarifying that, Sidi. Another important issue I wanted to touch on was the method that a student should take towards seeking knowledge. I mean, there seem to be various outlets that one can take. You've got the internet, you've got YouTube, you've got these kind of avenues. You've got physical classes. I mean, what's the difference between these? Which ones are preferred, especially in the setting that we're currently in?
Yeah. I mean, we touched upon part of this last time, and I will reiterate that because it's important. The internet, YouTube, etc. This is, alhamdulillah, this is a means that we can make use of, inshallah. Obviously, with internet and YouTube, we should take knowledge from websites or from videos of scholars that we know of. And not just anybody and everybody. Okay, it should be scholars that we know of, people that we know to be reliable and trustworthy as ulama, and to watch their videos or to visit their websites and to gain knowledge, inshallah ta'ala. Although, I think I mentioned last time as well, there is something important about attending a dars, attending a class. We have hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, if I'm not mistaken, in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet ﷺ spoke about how in these kind of majalis where there's dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and dirasa, studying, how you have tranquility descend from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the angels surround such gatherings, there's the rida of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's something very important, spiritual, in these gatherings. So I would say to take benefit from both, inshallah ta'ala. Now, to inshallah reliable websites one is aware of, and YouTube videos one reliable scholars one knows of, inshallah take benefit from it, but also to attend a class. This does lead me on to something else which is very important. It's very important to differentiate between what they call in Arabic language wa'adh, and sometimes khutbah, and dars. Okay. In English, you may differentiate by we're speaking about it as a speech or a talk on an aspect of Islam, and a lesson, okay, or a course, or studying a science in Islam. Okay. We should differentiate between the two, because some people, in my experience, or many people in my experience, the extent of their Islamic studies is they attend one speech, and then another, and then a third, and a fourth, or we'll watch one speech on YouTube, and then another, and then a third, and a fourth. This is, it's useful, it's helpful, it will give people snippets of information, inshallah ta'ala, and usually the purpose of wa'adh or khutbah is usually to motivate people, or give them information regarding something very particular. Whereas I was speaking about the tradition before, our tradition, what has it been, and throughout, from the time of Sahaba on, they've divided the Islamic knowledge into different sciences. So for example, you have the science of tafsir al-Quran, the science of hadith, and various branches to hadith, science of seerah, science, seerah, biography of the Prophet ﷺ, the science of fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence, the science of aqidah, okay? And for a person to truly understand the deen, this is our approach to studying it. We take it, we study the sciences. And each one of these, and again going back to what I was speaking about, the tradition we have, in each one of these sciences there are a number of books which are considered authoritative books. You see, in tafsir, in hadith, in seerah, in fiqh of the various madhahib. Okay, so again, what do we do? How do we study? In each of these sciences, we study them holistically from beginning to end. Study the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ from beginning to end. Okay, study fiqh from beginning to end. Study aqidah from beginning to end. Okay, take a book of traditional book of hadith and study it from beginning to end with, inshallah, a credible teacher. Now, that's going to give us rather than snippets of information. Okay, it's going to give us a much better understanding regarding the various aspects of our deen.
Sure.
So this is something very important for us to bear in mind. Okay, we're not going to get a holistic understanding from just speeches here and there, or even Q&A. And this, we have somebody was commenting the other day, mentioning how we've got a lot of Islamic channels nowadays on the television, and the comment was being made is that they are problematic. Okay, what I would say is that there's a benefit in them. A great benefit in them, inshallah ta'ala, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward everybody who's involved in them. But people, if they don't understand them for what they are, can get the wrong idea. Okay? And usually, I don't have television at home, I don't have access to them, but sometimes when I've seen some of these channels and some programs or what have you, they tend to either be talks that they present on these channels, or like Q&A and such things, which are useful, which are good, and which I will not say that this is something bad, it's good. But if somebody sees that as a substitute to studying the Islamic sciences, then it becomes problematic.
Sure.
Now, it should be, it is inshallah a very useful means of gaining Islamic knowledge, but it's not a sufficient means. And it should be a motivation for people. Okay. Here, on one of these channels, say for example, you've got a lesson on seerah, they speak about a certain aspect of seerah. Okay, this should be a motivation for a person to find a seerah teacher locally and study it from beginning to end.
Sure.
Okay, they give fatwa or what have you on the television of certain fiqh masail or what have you. The mufti or the sheikh who's on the television, he's not going to have time to give you every last detail.
Sure.
You see, let's say it's regarding a masala on sajda sahu, a part of prayer, when you make a mistake and perform a sajda sahu, what have you. It might be asked a question, he's going to answer it in 1 or 2 minutes.
Sure.
1 or 2 minutes may not be sufficient to give the full picture.
Sure.
You see, sometimes these things, they need a full detailed explanation. So that's something very important for people to bear in mind, that again, when we speak about the tradition method is what? To study sciences, beginning to end. And as I said, in all of these sciences we have authentic, authoritative, old books from the early periods that the Ummah agreed upon, that this is an authoritative book in the madhab, or an authoritative book in this science. Relate one's studies back to those, and inshallah there's great barakah there.
And me personally, I've noticed as well that some people initially use YouTube videos and the internet as a motivation to go and start studying,
Absolutely.
And it's just part of their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Alhamdulillah, there's blessing in all of these things, inshallah.
Jazakallah for clarifying that. So somebody's got the resolve to actually go to a dars and go and start learning an Islamic science, so they've attended one. And from my own personal experience, the first thing that was stressed to us was the etiquettes of the other of circles of knowledge and the other to maintain. So I just want to go through some of them, and if you could inshallah comment on them as well, please. After, so the initial and first point which was emphasized to us was to have shukr towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us the opportunity to attend this blessed gathering, for putting us in the presence of a knowledgeable scholar. And then also to not be arrogant or inappropriately shy, which I found very interesting as well. And to ask questions as well, because it's quite obvious that either one of them, either one of those extremes can be quite detrimental. And to also write down. And when I was actually sitting in class and the teacher mentioned this, I wasn't actually writing down. And then as soon as he said this, you should write down regardless of your memory. So I got out my paper and just started writing from there. And I was like, okay, got to write down. And also to have ritual purity when you're attending these lessons as well, as it's a form of showing veneration towards that which is bringing you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you could also comment on some of these, I'm sure there's many more etiquettes which I've missed from here, but these are just some of the ones I was able to recall.
This is a very important point, what we call in Arabic adab or adab, the plural of it, English often translated as etiquette. This is very important for any aspect of our deen or any aspect of our life. To get the most out of it, we have to observe the adab, the etiquette, which generally derive from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, a person can pray a prayer and have a valid prayer, but if a person prays that prayer with all of the etiquette related to the prayer, then there's going to get a lot more out of it. This is why we have a hadith, Sahih hadith in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, where the Prophet ﷺ spoke about that a person prays the prayer and doesn't have except for 1/10 of the reward, or a ninth of the reward, or an eighth of the reward. And here the Prophet ﷺ continue to speak about this. You see how a person only has a portion of the reward. What's this related to? Related to the presence of heart. What is presence of heart for prayer? It's part of the etiquette. Okay. So you have similar hadith for various aspects of worship. The Prophet ﷺ spoke about it regarding fasting. Certain people, they fast and they get nothing from their fast except for hunger and thirst. And various hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So the point is, etiquette is very important. Not only to do things and to devote time to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or for His sake, but do them correctly. And this is very much true with regards to Islamic knowledge. So for a person seeking knowledge to do it correctly, inshallah ta'ala, and you mentioned some of the most important of those etiquette just there, and let me speak a little more about some of them and add some of those, some to these etiquette, some further details. One of the first I would like to speak about is that for a person who's embarking upon Islamic knowledge, something which is very important is consistency. And this is something, as an educator, a religious teacher, something I suffer from quite a lot. Often I have students who, and mashallah, a good portion of them are brilliant. They're there almost every single lesson, except there's a real necessity or what have you. Others, they will, attend really quite sporadically, which they're still good in that, inshallah. There's still something they're going to benefit. But are they going to get a full, holistic understanding of the science that they're teaching? No. So this is very, very important, and this is one of the etiquette, one of the adab, is to be regular in one's attendance. Okay? And this goes both ways. I've come across situations where people study with a particular sheikh or teacher, and he continuously cancels. Okay? And then you've got the opposite, where the teacher's not, he's kind of attending, and the student's continuously not attending. Okay, you need from both sides. You need, for learning to take place, you need regularity of attendance from the teacher and from the students, inshallah ta'ala, a consistency there. A second one you touched upon, which is very important, is being present of mind and of heart in lesson. Okay. Sometimes I do this with my students, if I get a feeling that somebody's not quite attentive, I won't pick them out specifically. I don't like to embarrass people or pick people out or pick on people during the class, but I'll ask the question. You see, okay, right, I just mentioned this, okay, somebody answer this question to it. Right. You see what I mean? I'll derive a question from the information I've just given them. And sometimes I'll just ask them, right, what did I say? Somebody repeat it back to me. Yeah. Why? Because it's sad. Unfortunately, people will sometimes sit in class and they're completely switched off. Now, this is problematic, and obviously it's not in line with the adab, and person's not going to make the most of such a lesson. And as you said, to write things down. Now, this we have a hadith. This is not a prophetic hadith. This is a statement of a Sahabi, Anas bin Malik, student of the Prophet ﷺ. This is mentioned in Tabarani, where he said, "Qayyidul ilma bil kitaba." Okay, where he said, keep hold of knowledge by writing it. Now, and this hadith, inshallah, sahih, and it's in Tabarani. So this is the point, it's important for a person who's studying to make notes, to write things down, however confident one is with regards to, their memory and how good their memory is. Ultimately, everybody forgets things, so important matters one studies, to make a note of them. This is very, very important. Now, touching upon what you also said with regards to not being arrogant and not being inappropriately shy, this is narrated from one of the students of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas, Imam Mujahid, narrated in Bukhari, where he said, لا يتعلم العلم مستحي ولا مستكبر. He mentioned two types of people who don't want to study: an arrogant person and a person who is overly shy, inappropriately shy. Now, modesty and to be shy generally is considered very positive in Islam. Okay, it's praised a great deal. We have many hadith about it. Okay, but as Sayyidah Aisha said, this is also narrated in Bukhari. She mentioned the following: نعم النساء نساء الأنصار لم يمنعهن الحياء أن يتفقهن في الدين. Okay, she said the best of women are the women of the Ansar. The Ansar are the Muslims from Medina. Yeah. And then she went on to explain why. She said because their modesty or shyness does not prevent them from learning the religion. So this is important. That this is something very, very positive, very highly regarded in Islam. Modesty and even to be shy or what have you. This is a good thing. Nothing bad about it. It's, not something that one needs to fight against necessarily. But if it's preventing somebody from something positive, then it becomes a slight problem, and then it needs to be countered, inshaAllah ta'ala. So these are some important adab. There are others besides, but these are some of the very important adab or etiquette related to studying.
Yeah, so when there's a time to be forward, you should be forward, especially in the in a place of learning. I mean, even from my own personal experience, I feel that you actually retain a lot more information when you're in an active learning environment rather than more of a passive one where you're just sitting in the corner.
Absolutely. No, alhamdulillah. There's always benefit, though. There's always benefit. Sure. Even if somebody comes and just listens and doesn't ask a question, there's still going to be immense benefit, but there's going to be greater benefit, inshallah. And also it's in the classroom we have situations where you have people who ask questions for the sake of others, which is also something positive and will help those people who are not so forward in asking questions, inshallah. Sure. And there's great reward in doing that also.
Sure. Another issue I feel which we should address is there seems to be an obvious pressure, more of a contemporary pressure for Islamic Reformation, which can sometimes make Muslims want to try and keep face by saying, in Islamic extreme cases, Islam isn't a barbaric religion. We are keeping up with the times. It's not outdated. Yeah. I mean, what can we say to this kind of rhetoric, and especially in light of the conversation we've been having about seeking knowledge? What can a student do in their choices with regards to seeking knowledge?
Yeah, again, this comes back to the same issue of following our tradition. Yes, no doubt about it, Islam is definitely not a barbaric religion. There's nothing more barbaric about it. But Islam does not blindly follow anything, and it certainly doesn't blindly follow the norms of a society. So this is something very important for us to bear in mind, again, when we study our deen, when we seek an understanding of our deen, and again, going back to the same issue of when we seek people who are we're going to take religion from, or religious interpretation of Quran and Hadith from. Before I speak about it in more detail, let me just mention a Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. This is in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet ﷺ said, لا تزال طائفة من أمتي ظاهرين على الحق لا يضرهم من خذلهم حتى يأتي أمر الله وهم كذلك. Okay, which translates as, there will always be a group from my ummah, from my nation, who are steadfast on the truth. They will not be harmed by those who turn away from them, until the command of Allah comes, and they are like that, meaning until the end of times, until the Day of Judgment. So again, it's not only now, maybe there's more pressure now, and as you mentioned, there's so many people, sometimes from within the Ummah, sometimes from outside the Ummah, who are asking for Islamic Reformation. Islam needs to be reformed to fit in with the modern times. We don't have a concept of reformation in Islam. Okay, why? Because as we spoke about at the very beginning, what's authoritative in Islam is its root, where it started. It started with the Quran. It started with the Hadith. This is absolute authority. Okay, and then what's authoritative in terms of interpreting Quran and Hadith are those early generations. Now, and obviously those early generations, and when we spoke about the madhahib as well, they allow for differences in culture. They allow for differences in times. They allow, you have certain aspects of the deen which are fixed, and they're not going to change, and they're not going to be influenced by time and place and circumstance. And you have others, many aspects of the deen, which are. Okay, so there is already an allowance for that. This is already within the Quran, it's within the Hadith, it's within the interpretation of the ulama and the Salaf as-Salih and the madhahib. It's already there, it's already found there. What some people who are calling for Islamic Reformation, they want to go further than that. Okay, certain things that we've always considered to be thawabit, pillars which are not to be moved, which are not to be tampered with, which are not to be adjusted. There's a movement or there's voices out there who are trying to call for some flexibility there. So. As I mentioned, this is not something new. From the very beginning, we've always had people who are unhappy external often and sometimes internal, are unhappy with certain aspects, and they want reformation, they want change, they want significant change with regards to these things. It's always been the case. One may argue that it's even more so the case now because of the way the world is nowadays and how different aspects of various societies impact each other. Or this constant speech about the modern world. Islam needs to modernize to fit in with the modern world. Okay, Islam doesn't need to modernize. Islam needs to be practiced correctly. When Islam is practiced correctly, then it's not a follower of the modern world, or the pre-modern world, or the post-modern world. Rather, it's a guide for it. We don't want our religion just to, fit in with everything. Rather, we want our religion to be what it is. It's a moral authority. Okay? We want our religion to tell us that in our current context, in our current state, in the current situation we face as humanity, as people, what's right and what's wrong. We want it to be a guiding force.
Sure.
We don't want it to be a force which is just kind of following along whatever people are doing. We'll try to make Islam fit that one way or another. No, this is not what it is. It's authoritative over us. It's superior to just following the norms and the desires of people. So this is something important. So this is something, another thing for a person to consider when looking at where to take Islam from or who to take Islam from. Is this person true to our tradition, or does this person seem to be overly influenced by these calls for reformation and by these calls for changing some of our fundamentals in our blessed religion? Wallahu ta'ala a'lam.
Yeah, so I think it's quite an interesting point that you mentioned right at the end, where Islam is actually an enabler for us, something that empowers us rather than restricts us, and how that this goes back to following somebody who is in line with the Islamic tradition. I think before we finish, I just wanted to address another point, if possible. So we've spoken about Islamic science and how there is much reward and much benefit in there, but could we equally, or if not gain, at least some reward from studying some secular subjects, as well as Islamic sciences?
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt about it. We're always going to consider the sciences more directly related to Quran and Hadith to have greater reward, but other sciences that we have, we would, generally they all come back and they have some relationship to the Quran. Okay, be it a study of history, be it a study of what we tend to call the sciences nowadays, be it physics or biology or chemistry or other things besides. All of this, there's reward in inshaAllah ta'ala, as long as it's done correctly and as long as it's done under the guidance of Quran and Hadith. To study geography, for example, all of these various sciences, yes, absolutely, no doubt about it. There's great reward therein if it's done with the intention of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and serving the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His sake.
Jazakallah khair, Sidi. That's all for this time. Inshallah, join us again. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.